welcome to another episode of HR Nightmares, where the team at Leath HR Group and myself invite a guest in to talk about all the ways that we can hopefully avoid HR nightmares and not find ourselves in the thick of them. And we try to do it with a little bit of fun and humor, but real talk. So I'm super happy to have two not so new faces to me, but new faces to the podcast. We've got Andy Almeter and Meade Van Pelt. And so I'm going to just do a quick little introduction on Meade. But before I do that, if you like HR Nightmares, please hit subscribe, share it with your friends, let people know that they should write in for some free HR advice. We absolutely love getting all the write-ins. And in fact, we're going to put Meade and Andy on the spot today and see how they would coach this lovely audience member that wrote in about trying to dupe the interview process. So I'm really looking forward to that. Nice. As we know, Andy's the president of Leath HR Group. I'm chief people officer at a software company called Vantica and founder of Leath HR Group and Work Talk. And Meade is the executive director of the Harrelson Center. I'll let you explain, but it's a non-for-profit in Wilmington, North Carolina. But she hasn't always worked in the non-for-profit space. And so I think it's so awesome just being able to hear your journey. People always want to understand, hey, I'm in this one career right now, and I'd like to do something different. How did you make that jump from 20 plus years at Pitney Bowes in sales, super successful career there, and then completely transition to nonprofit leadership roles? And then we want to get into talking to you about how do you lead an organization like the Harrelson? So why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about what you do at Harrelson Center and what the mission is of that organization, what we need to know as an audience to help get involved.
Okay, great. Always want people involved. So more the people, the better. But the Harrelson Center is unique in that it is a centralized humanitarian services center where we have other nonprofits. So we are supporting the nonprofit community, that whole sector, so that they can be more empowered and that ultimately those nonprofits provide hope and opportunity and empowerment to others. So it's kind of getting yourself, cleaning your own house first, getting stable, and then and growing your programs and then reaching out into the community further. And really by being all together, there's proximity, purely just advantage of proximity. So we've got about 20 nonprofit humanitarian partners who are on the campus. And then we have about 20 more who are associate partners who may not be on the campus for many reasons. It might be they own their own space. It might be they need a warehouse. Could be that they're a startup working out of the back of their home. But those really, the synergies that come from that bigger community and then with the campus community makes us all more effective as we share and empower each other. But also it helps people also stay in their lane. So they stay very mission focused. And our mission is to bring them up. But also we do have some other programs that kind of help clients directly in our community to really be a front door to meet us, and then we resource them. So we basically introduce them like soft handoffs to each other, walk them down the hall, and then other nonprofits do the same. So we kind of set that sort of culture and environment.
So how'd you find yourself here?
Oh, gosh. So, I'm originally born and raised in Wilmington, so I love Wilmington. So, anything you can find to do in Wilmington, a lot of people are looking for something to do in Wilmington.
We're no
and you can always
like
volunteer.
Gem, yeah.
No.
Yeah. No.
Hidden no more. But, so I was born and raised here, left at college, and then I came back after working, like you said. I'd been with Pitney Bowes at that point a while, and then I stayed with Pitney Bowes when I came back to Wilmington and just worked remotely for about 5 years and traveled. And then
was that a thing?
Yeah.
It was 6 years ago,
Well,
right?
it was sales. So I was like, I would travel. I'd go up to the RTP area. I was here. So when I was going to come back, I was in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, those areas, and then decided I wanted to come back to North Carolina. But I was like, I don't want to just come back to North Carolina. I want to come back to Wilmington. Mm-hmm. So my family was here. I had a lot of family here. So brothers brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents. So it was a good time too. At that point, my grandparents like in their 90s, so it was a good time for me to kind of come home. But the first thing I did, because I was having a hard time convincing myself that I was ready to leave where I was. So I was like, I'm going to sign up for the MBA program at UNCW. If I get in, I'll go. So I got in and literally left New York City at like 2:00 in the morning. Now I knew I'd been in for a while, but I was still procrastinating it, and left. I may have left earlier. Maybe it was midnight. Anyway, drove all night and pulled right into my first class at UNCW.
Oh my
yeah. So
that's easy.
Which was a Saturday. I was like, hey, right, nice to meet you. You can imagine what I looked like at 8 a.m. on a Saturday after driving all night. And with a U-Haul. I drove a U-Haul, with stuff. But that was kind of, wanted to come back. When I first got to New York, I wanted to work in nonprofit. So it wasn't like it came out of the complete blue. Also learned very quickly you could not afford to live and work in New York City in nonprofit. So I applied for a couple of jobs, got these offers, in the 20s, and was like, that's not going to pay for my apartment. So that's when I started looking into sales and other things and went into management and marketing and leasing and all these other things. But what really, so I got back to Wilmington, and then, you kind of get back in the fabric. I didn't know that many people anymore. I'd been gone a long time, but I had my family, and then we went to UNCW. So I met all these amazing professionals that were in the MBA program at UNCW, and started sort of volunteering and re-engaging. And that's when I learned about the Harrelson Center. So I went to a lunch. Somebody invited me to a fundraising lunch.
Lunches.
Have you ever been invited to a fundraising lunch?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get quite sucked in the first year, but and then I guess the next year, a couple of my friends. So and I met Vicki Dole, who was my predecessor, who was running it at the time, who'd been there for about 5 years, and so ultimately they were looking for someone at that time, and she was like, I can't leave until I know that the Harrelson Center is in the right hands. But I was still working and doing that kind of thing with sales, and anyway, I just kept exploring it, and I had a great pastor at the time. She has her church now in Blowing Rock, but she was like, it might just be vocational clarity. You may just be having some vocational clarity where you want to give back, and tired of doing what you've been doing. You've been doing it for a long time. I mean, my job changed a lot. It would evolve a lot. Meeting new people all the time, love people, always want to be with people, figuring people out. So that's what brought me back to Wilmington. That's what's gotten me to the Harrelson Center with absolutely no nonprofit training whatsoever. So you can imagine I started studying. I had management, I'd managed people, I'd done a little bit of everything. And being with a large company, we were constantly trained. It was just a part of what you did. So any new thing that came out, we were trained, whether it was Salesforce, whether it was just technology, how to use, new phones and all the apps and all the things. And just general, overview of HR, overview of this and that. And so I had a very broad experience range. And
onboarding is so important. And so you're making a huge life decision to move from this stable job that's always evolving. You're having fun, you're traveling, you're getting educated, you got your MBA, and then you make this decision to, okay, I'm going to make a vocational change. And there was no onboarding plan, no training checklist. You were kind of just going to maybe spend some time with this successor or the predecessor, your predecessor. So looking back on that, is there anything, that you wish you would have known, or do you treat some of your folks that come on board onto your staff now differently? Looking back at your own experience about, oh my God, I had no non-for-profit experience, and here I was now taking over a pretty significant organization.
Yes. So I think is using the resources that are available to you. Now I work with a lot of nonprofits and a lot of people who are thinking about nonprofit work or starting or converting or taking a piece of their for-profit and doing it. So I think what I would have said initially, since there wasn't necessarily the orientation factor, you weren't giving your binder and, or your HR handbook, none of those things happened, right? But I think today that makes me all more aware of that we should do those things. So I immediately North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. I really rely on them. We're a member. Thank goodness they're getting ready to have their first in-person meeting in 3 years.
Oh, wow.
In November. It's in Durham. And that's a great resource for nonprofits. And I think for me, I always looked at things more like a business. But then, so that's why I tell people too, I said, I think the reason it's worked well since I've been there is because I've treated it like a business rather than thinking of the nonprofit things and maybe the way nonprofits do things. But I also leaned heavily into like local resources like Keno, Quality Enhancement for Nonprofit Organizations. And, took all the things, board governance. And I do remember when I took this job, the president of the board at that time handed me his thoroughly entertaining board governance book. And he was like, I think you're going to need this more than I'm going to. As he exited out, of his year, his job was to find a replacement, basically,
I think coming from corporate, though, has got to be a great perspective to folks that come up through the not-for-profits and stay in not-for-profit worlds. So it is good to I think get that experience like what you had before coming to the Harrelson Center.
You struggle to attract. I completely agree. Like I wish more non-for-profits or nonprofits would hire people from business. A lot of times, just like a lot of industries, we get very finicky about if I work in software, I only want to find people with software experience. If I work in manufacturing, I want people with manufacturing. If I'm in pharma, I want pharma people. And it's like, well, wouldn't it be great to get somebody with a different perspective? And that's what they did by bringing you on. So number one, I would highly encourage people listening, if you have an opportunity to hire outside of your industry, try to do that. It's just good. It's kind of like not hiring everybody from Penn State, although it's a great school and you probably should.
Wow.
UNCW is also a good school. But I think I would challenge people listening to hire outside of your industry or outside of your sector. And then what I'm super curious about is why were you even attracted in the first place?
Yeah, I think because I think the model of the Harrelson Center made so much common sense to me. I've always been kind of a very practical realist. And when I saw it and then toured it, I thought, wow, this just makes way too much sense. Why is nobody else doing this? And it's funny because still today, I'm almost 6 years there. People come all the time. They come from Atlanta. They come from Durham. They come from Rocky Mount. They come from all these places. And they're like, why don't we have this? Why are we not doing this? And
that's
I think
awesome.
that's why it made so much sense to me.
Yeah.
Versus, I don't know if I would have gone into, and I liked the broad perspective. Mm-hmm. So, and that's me. But, some people would go into a nonprofit work because they really deeply invested in that, or they join a board because that's what they're, I have friends who are on the ovarian, for She-Rocks, like ovarian cancer, things because you have a very personal relationship with it. And this was a different thing for me. It was more of a very broad management. I liked the fact that everybody had their own organizations and had their own leadership, but that we could all cross over and collaborate. That's, I think, what was really appealing.
And from a HR standpoint, I feel like that's really important too, because, resource constrained is usually kind of what you think about when you think about not-for-profits. It's having to do 10 times more with that dollar. And so having a place like Harrelson Center that can pool those resources, be that hub, and share best practices. I'm thinking about through an HR lens, but it kind of goes fundraising, grant writing, everything. I mean, you guys do all that, right?
Yeah, well, everybody's got to do it. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. It's like, it's interesting because when I first got there, a couple of the different directors would say, no, but we're different or we're unique or we're this. And I'm like, well, what you're doing and ultimately what you're trying to achieve may be different when they're trying, but we all have to do all the same things. Like there are certain things that are just part of our infrastructure that we all have to do. So, and part of that are the things you just mentioned, Andy. So like fundraising and public relations and community engagement and financials, HR, we're all doing the same things when it comes to that. So if you can get those things down, then it makes what you're doing more focused and stronger too. But yeah, so we do have a PR person, we have a communications person on staff. So we do outreach. So one of our big pieces is to educate people in the community about the organizations, the partners, we call them partners, that we work with specifically. So we now do 2 drop-in tours a month. We might get 20 or 30 people drop in on our drop-in tours because we say, you don't have to tell us you're coming. Just show up at noon, show up at your lunchtime. And it's all walks of life. So that I find that very interesting. Like, you might find an attorney who wants to figure out how to place in, and get involved, or you might find somebody in the social work programs, people from DSS, people from the school systems, just people who've moved here over the bridge in Leland who are like, hey, I thought I was going to come play golf all day, but I'm not every day. So now I want to use some of my skills here. How do I get involved?
And does the Harrelson Center sort of act like a broker for folks that want to volunteer and spend time but don't want to dedicate to just one agency? Maybe they want to be involved. They got multiple passions. Do you do that?
What that really works with is the youth.
Okay.
So, because the youth haven't really figured out why or what they want to do.
Exposure.
So we do a lot of programs like New Hanover High School comes down and they can jump around. We'll swap them off. Okay. There's actually coursework like that does that type of work. So that also even with the people who are in social work programs like at UNCW, because they haven't, how that is. You're in college, you're kind of trying to narrow down. So I think particularly with our younger generation, the next generation who's going to be looking out after all of us too, is to develop that sense of mission and outreach. And really that younger generation, they have it. Like they want to be there. And it gives them purpose, which I think also is a good thing, just for mental health. And today people need purpose and they need to feel like they're valued and they're doing good work. And that works.
That is super amazing. I love knowing that, one of the high schools at least is spending quality time. You've got 40-something non-for-profits that are housed in the Harrelson Center. And so you just think about like talent pipeline management. I spend a lot of time thinking about tech talent. And then you've spent a long time thinking about just healthcare shortages. But there are shortages everywhere. There's shortages from teachers to humanitarian workers. And so that's not something that a lot of parents are pushing their kids to. And it's, probably because it doesn't make a ton of money most of the time.
Right.
So unless you're like Prince Harry or something, I don't know what he makes.
Yeah, he's doing pretty well.
He's doing fine, it seems like.
That's definitely true. But it is that we have got such a great pipeline right here in town.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the people who come through will end up employed at one of the organizations or even in some sort of pseudo thing. Like we've had some, not even just social work, but people, communications majors, graphic designer majors, where maybe a nonprofit doesn't need a full-time graphic communication. So they split them. Like we have a few people on campus who are like, they work half-time for this organization, half-time for that organization. And some people find that very satisfying. Like they like to be doing the different things too. So, but yes, developing children, people don't say, it's hard even teaching today. People are like, they think, oh, we're not going to make enough money. Now, I will say one thing that's, back to sort of my corporate background, I think people should be paid what they're worth. And I have challenges, or I would say, with the fact that nonprofits may not be paid. They feel like, oh, you're getting so much benefit and purpose and joy in your work, but they still have to support children and everything else, and have to have transportation and safe and affordable housing and all these, things. So that's one of the things I like about like an NC Center for Nonprofits is they advocate for things like that and to keep things tax free and to try to find solutions for healthcare for nonprofit organizations. And there's a lot to it.
Yeah,
as you know.
I think about also the employee engagement, right? There's a lot of folks that around town, around any town, really, to be honest, that are looking for something to do with their work people.
Yes.
And so, are you seeing like teams from larger companies, small companies, maybe remote workers that are kind of pooling together with a common mission and coming out to volunteer? Are you seeing a lot of that?
And what's even interesting is that because we are kind of a destination place, is you will find people having meetings here, and while they're here, they want to do a project together. Because these might be a lot of people that work remotely, in a corporation, but they're getting together, and let's say they're at the Blockade Road, they're somewhere down, staying downtown or at the beach or whatever, and that while they're here, they want to engage. So we do some of that, plus just local companies come in. And I think it's hard because there's that convenience factor of people wanting to do things like they want to come on a Saturday morning, and then we're all kind of like, we don't want to be there on a Saturday morning. Right. And then the clients and the nonprofits aren't there. So I think some of those can be challenges, like if they need to kind of, we fit people in, and they want something a certain day, and you're like, well, we don't have anything going on that day. So sometimes it's almost like you have to create things versus, when we have 200 bicycles put together, we're like, where are these people that we really need right now? So it's interesting that way. So sometimes I would love to hear from more corporations who would come in and actually have a bit of an idea of what they want to do and realize it's a big thing. They want to come in and get the time, but they also need to put the finance to it. So like they would probably love to come in and put 200 bicycles. If they would offer to go buy 200 bicycles and then come put them together, that would be huge.
Even better. Right?
Yes. Yeah. So I would say, and I think that's for everything, I love, it's all time, talent, and treasure. I mean, it's all three, right? But I do just think that people do need to be aware of that it does sometimes place a burden on the nonprofit staff who's got a lot on their moving along too. But we love it when they can come and say, we want to do this and this is why we're going to do it. And we're going to bring our own resources. And we've had some good examples of that. We've had Girls in Technology days and things like that, where they bus the kids to the campus. They take care of lunch and breakfast, and they have all their volunteers, and that's huge. And then we can place them. So we are absolutely open to things like that.
That's a great message to get out too. That if you're going to come with a plan, and come with dollars,
and we'll help you, and we'll help you. Like we'll help you develop it if you just reach out and say, I'm thinking about this. And but it's hard. Companies I think try very hard these days because they're trying to figure out what do our employees want to do? What are they willing to spend their time doing? They certainly can do it independently, but I get, the team building piece of doing it together. And so, they'll be like, well, they say they all like children. And I'm like, well, yes, we all like children.
Yes, and we're going to have to background check everyone. Sorry.
Exactly.
Oh, to the HR nightmare piece.
So let's go back to like the resource piece. You gave a couple of good examples. Keno, Queno, which is through UNC Wilmington's campus. We were super fortunate locally to have a great campus like that and a good office like Keno. But do you know, like in other communities across the United States, like are there other Kenos?
No, a lot of people don't have it. I mean, a lot of people don't have a centralized campus. A lot of people don't have a Keno. I mean, a good way, too, is to engage and make sure you find out. Like Duke University, we've actually crossed over with them, Chapel Hill. I mean, here's some things like we're looking at now. So moving in October is Legal Aid of North Carolina, which has been around for a while. And they have a Second Chance Initiative, which are expunction clinics, basically. But we've never had that in our county and surrounding counties. So this will be the first time we've had that in Wilmington and New Hanover County.
Awesome.
But through that, then they will arrange through like these clinics, like at the like law clinics, and they'll bring them down. So like they'll come for spring break or fall break, the upcoming fall break, and we'll set them up on campus, and then Legal Aid can run like basically expunction clinics with all these law students, and so those types of relationships, we're always looking to go deeper. And I just talked to someone recently who's on one of the law school board at Carolina, and she was like, we desperately, we want to be reaching out. We want to be in the community. And so trying to find ways for them to plug in when we know we need it, even if they can Zoom in and provide services. People should always look. So it doesn't have to be that they're right in your backyard, I guess is what I'm saying too. Yeah. We can look further, especially maybe some academia, places where they have a little bit of money and they're willing to do things like that and reach beyond their campus. So I think those are important, connections. Everything is a connection, is as we know.
Yeah.
That specific example is why the Harrelson Center works so well, right? Because then there's an expunction. Am I saying that right? Expunction?
Yeah.
Expunction.
It's confusing because it's like expunge, expunct.
An expunge clinic happening, and then you've got Step Up Wilmington,
Right, yeah.
there, to say, okay, when this is cleared up, and then you can get the hospital. I don't know if they have a seat there, but so to get folks from like a talent acquisition standpoint, coming and saying like, okay, when this gets cleared, we have a spot. We need you. Because there were big shortages lately.
Yes.
NAs, nurse assistants. I'm looking at through a healthcare lens right now, but wheelchair van drivers, one DUI 10 years ago, and that's not an option for you. But does
even
that define you?
FedEx, UPS, USPS. I mean, to be able to expunge something like that off a record could be like...
That's great. That's wonderful.
I mean, it's a real barrier to employment, obviously, and even housing. Like that's a big, that's a big piece of that can change someone's trajectory.
For another episode of total nightmares.
So to get to the HR piece, in
is that
Harrelson
why
Center,
we're here today?
That's why we're here. So are there trainings that are specific to not-for-profits that you provide, or
other companies could rely on you. Everyone's strapped for cash and want to do the most with their money that their donors are giving them. Is there a reason why they should come to Harrelson Center, or why other communities that might be listening should come here, visit you, model after you, and learn from you?
Yes, and would love to see that. Good. So, well, first of all, I will just say that through Leath HR at the time, I think that's what it was called then. You're still at Leath. Is it Leath HR?
Leath HR.
Okay.
He's
Leath
running
HR.
it now.
Here's the plug for Andy. But we did during COVID, using our time remotely productively, which we weren't remote very long. I will just tell you that. But we did our HR manual, updated our HR manual, which is essential. And I always think and I don't give out my HR manual to just everybody. I'll just say, because, they all want to mirror it. I'm like, I will say, you need to do your HR manual. It's very important. And it's a complicated thing for people, because they're like, well, I'm just one person. I don't have any staff. But I'm like, but you have all these volunteers, and they're basically like your staff. So I think that's a big message to nonprofits too, is that you have to be as protective over your volunteers and have them orient and train as too. So well, I'll just give you an example. Like Monday, we have the New Hanover County Office of Equity and Diversity is coming in. So Linda Thompson and Travis Corpening, who anybody local might know, but they will then do diversity and equity training. And we don't just do it for our staff. We open it up to all the partners, to their key volunteers, to their staff. So that's a way right there that people don't have to go outreach for other things. So it is more cost effective when we share in all these resources together. In this case, that's a complimentary training. So thank you to New Hanover County. But, and we do a lot of that too, like negotiate on behalf of the whole partners and staff. Like we try to find things more reasonable as we possibly can. So just as an example, like I think that I've learned so much from North Carolina Center for Nonprofits that then I want everyone to have a membership to that. So that is something that the Harrelson Center in 2023 is that we're covering all of our partners' membership to that, so that we're having the same conversations and we develop that culture with each other. Like, did you see that? What did you hear from that? And then we can do follow-ups from that. And then we can also broadcast it if people wanted to do the special, because they do trainings constantly all the time. So we try to find places that we are of value and then bring it in, and it could be racial equity, but it could be anything, just from... So just... We just had Keno, just did their group too. Same thing. Offer it up to all the partners and all do it together. And it kind of keeps it alive, too. So when you do things together, you tend to talk about them and then you tend to play it out actually in your organization versus just kind of putting it on a shelf.
But what a good idea that if you don't have a Harrelson Center in your community, but you have a lot of nonprofit organizations, like to just think a little bit, you probably always think selflessly, but think a little bit more broadly, selflessly. If I'm holding a training for my 8 people and there's 3 other nonprofits right down the road, wouldn't it be nice if I picked up the phone and just said, hey, I'm doing this. I already paid for it. Do you want to come? It's so simple, but we often don't think about, oh, well, what they're doing is different. Yeah, but this isn't. This specific training on racial equity is not different. Might make sense. And it might be more fun when we can banter back and forth and hang out with some folks that we don't often see. And I see my same 8 people every day. So
Right.
It's like a simple idea, but for many people, they're like, oh, yeah, I should probably do that.
Yeah,
but,
you get different perspectives, different scenarios brought up. I mean, those are all great ways to kind of solidify what you're hearing, because a lot of time it's theory, and let's tie it to practice and different practices for different organizations.
And we want to build the relationship. So the better the partners know each other and know what each other do, the more effective it is for the community, because a client comes in, or people call them different. We have all groups to call different things. Somebody might call them a neighbor, a client, a patient, whatever it is. But they come in and they know that they've talked to them, they develop that relationship, and then they trust them. And then I know, oh, well, so-and-so does this, and you've mentioned to me that this is a big challenge for you. And then I can then hand them off, and I have a relationship with that other organization. And it also, it eliminates, I think, a little bit of what can be competitive. A lot of people think, oh, everybody's vying for the same dollars, they're vying for the same donors, and there's plenty of people to go around. I think everybody needs to know that too. But I think the bigger thing is that when you start to build that relationship and trust among the different organizations, and you'll always have people who are not those people, right? They probably, that's why I say, well, make sure this is where you want to be too. And it's not that we're all in each other's business. We're not. Like, everybody's doing their thing day in, day out.
No, they're busy.
But I think that just to even run into the elevator with somebody, and I see somebody and I think, oh my gosh, I should have called you. I needed to call you. I'm glad I saw you, because let me tell you, here's something when I thought about your organization, maybe, or it could just be I thought about a particular client that brings something. And there's something to be said for that too.
Yeah, that's an intentional collision kind of environment that you've got. Yeah, it's the hub. I mean, that's kind of the way I
love it.
think of it.
Everyone in the world is freaking out about not being able to hire people. We actually find that we don't really struggle that bad, like with our clients or at Vanica, to hire, because we're super, super intentional about it. But everyone else seems to be freaking out about hiring. How's the nonprofit world and hiring and just vacancies? Like, how is that, and how do you approach it when your folks within your kingdom have openings and are having a tough time?
Yeah, so we do a community newsletter once a month out to the community. We do a partner internal version, and we do a community version. So we put job postings are there, so everybody can see what jobs are available, and then we push it out to the community. So that's one reason we have our database is over 3,000, so like 3,500 people. So it may not be that person's looking for that job, but they may know their father, son, child, cousin, nephew, neighbor who does, right? So that's one of the things we try to help people put it out there, right? And so even, for example, on LinkedIn, I know we posted this month that legal aid is coming. They've never had these positions before, so they're hiring an attorney, a staff attorney, senior attorney, staff attorney, paralegal, social worker. So we're always helping promote that too. One, we know that these are the people we're going to be working beside, right? So we're just like, okay, let's make
vested interest.
Yeah, a little bit, but I think that's one of the things. I don't feel like I feel like jobs are definitely getting. Although we need a building and maintenance manager. I think I told you that when I saw you last time, and that tends to be a harder position to fill for us lately. So I'm putting, if anybody has a building and maintenance manager, this is a really fun building to work in. It's an old building, but it's interesting. It'll keep people interested. But I do think that. There are so many people coming out of the UNCW. I think it's a big pull for us, but I haven't seen anybody like openings sitting open, for long periods of time.
That's great.
I thoroughly believe in outsourcing to people, particularly when you have a very specific position that you're looking for.
Call Leath HR.
Plug. But also, there have definitely been people crossed over in organizations within the organization. I was
going to ask about that. Do you see any kind of internal migration?
I've seen a little bit of that.
How do you control for that? Or is it okay? Maybe it's good.
Fine, and everybody.
God bless, because companies have gotten in trouble for antitrust and preventing people from, advancing their careers because they don't want them leaving to go to this other company. It's like,
Antitrust is good. Glad you brought that up. That's not the direction I was headed. The direction I was headed was like, are there different? I mean, do you do compensation studies? What kind of incentives do you propose?
To keep
others, propose to others, to take a look at, potentially doing to keep your top talent.
Yeah, I think, I'm probably like everybody else where you Google, okay, what's the average salary in Wilmington, North Carolina for such and such thing, and then I rely on the expert reports too, but I do think that people want to be competitive. I think the bigger problem in the nonprofit community, what it can tend to be is not actually getting someone, but keeping someone who, and people might be having changes in their lives, which dictate they need to also maybe make changes if they can't get the compensation and the incentives and the things that they're looking for there. So, I've seen a lot of good people come through at different organizations, and then they kind of get scooped up by another corporation or larger government entity, or, I think that is why it is so important for nonprofits to be competitive. Yes. And because there does have to be a lot of job satisfaction, and a lot of times, sometimes people on boards don't even understand it either, because they're like, well, why are we not just having them do this and do that? And I was like, well, they might not be getting compensated as much, so they need to be getting pleasure, enjoyment, and professional development out of the job while they're here. And that is what's going to probably keep them there, as long as possible. And then we keep trying to just increase what they get paid. But it's the challenge for everybody is, am I compensating people enough? And then everybody's unique. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I think you just have to take in people's personal objectives and understand their objectives.
Yeah, what are their priorities?
Right. So
is it a 4-day week? Is it getting out on the weekends to play with kids?
Yeah, or not taking the work home? Is it, it can be, and some people they're just very good at what they do, and they don't like to, they may be very drilled into what they do, so they don't want the social environment. You need to make sure they have a nice, quiet office, at the end of the hall. So I think it's just knowing the employee, asking the questions, doing the reviews, and not just about what's happening with work, but if they want to share if they want to talk about, I like to know if you have any personal objectives you'd like to share with me, so that we can be working towards those together,
Full picture. Yeah.
Yeah. And those things might not be correct in the corporate world. So I'm just saying this.
They are absolutely correct. Every week I'm asking, every week people need to be asking, like, what's going on in your life? Like, what can I do to help you? Talking about positive. This is one great thing that we do at Vanica is we open every meeting by saying, okay, positive focus. Meade, you're first. Andy, you're next. Yeah. Okay, Lisa, I'm going to tell you about my kids going back to school this week. It was super adorable watching them hold hands get on the bus.
Get a little personal, get a little work, and let them share. You don't drag it out.
Which is what's so funny about this. So I remember in kindergarten, that's what they would do. They go around the room. They're like, how are you feeling today? How are you feeling today? They're like, there's some little chant.
They had a point.
Yeah. And they'd come out and they'd point to that child and they'd be like, how do you feel today? And because some days you come to work and, you're bringing your whole self to work.
Yeah,
you try to,
absolutely.
and so some days you're like really high on things, and some days you're kind of like, Mm-hmm. So I think you have to take that into consideration too. And so I think it was like, some of what we learned in kindergarten, and there's something about that, like some book or something about that. But sometimes it's just going back to like knowing people and
the
sort
basics.
Just
get to know your people.
Back to the basics.
Yeah, that's exactly why we developed Work Talk. So if you don't actually go and sit down with your folks, they're traveling salespeople, and you're always just like harping on numbers and production and like what you're driving home revenue wise for me, the business owner. Like sometimes you do have to use an app to like just remind us and like ping somebody like, how are you feeling today? And then I can kind of see, Meade's always happy face, but then today she's like pissed face. And I'm going to actually call her because I want to see why is she so pissed today. Mm-hmm. So check Work Talk out. It's free for 30 days. I do want to get to my favorite part of every episode, which is the write-ins. And so I've got a good one here that I'm hoping you guys will help me work through. So this person gave us a couple of nice compliments, big fans of the show. Shout out to Signal Fire, who does our recordings and editing. They do a great job. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm trying a new method when applying for a new position. I just started calling employers and saying, hey, I was told to call back today to set up an interview. I was sick of not getting any word back from these employers. So then the realization struck that they were going through hundreds of applications and are probably at the point they don't know who's is who anymore. So new job application process is to apply for a job, wait for a few days, call employer, letting them know I was under consideration for the position and was scheduling an interview per their request. Results so far are 4 interviews this month compared to 1 interview over the last 3 months. Of the 20 or so times I've done this, I've only been called out on it once. And that one time I just hung up.
We don't know you.
Do you think recruiters are likely to catch my proactive attempts to have an interview?
So who wrote that?
I know, I was trying to figure it out.
No, wow. Tread carefully with that. I'll
You're
just,
the salesperson, but I think
Yeah,
that's a damn good sales tactic. Like, to be honest,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes like when you're trying to close a deal or something, you know, make it seem like you're
It's already done.
You're hotter than maybe you are. But like, I don't know. Yeah, the fibbing part, I mean, it's a little white lie, right? And
but that, if you're willing to fib just a little bit right out of the gate with the first sentence,
to try to get traction.
they're not going to want you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. They're going to be like, I wouldn't. I would say, solid move. Good try. But I can't trust you.
Yeah, because adding the per your request.
That's
thing
the part where I was like,
is the squeaky part there. I mean, first of all, I think it's great for people to make the call. Don't sit around and wait for somebody to call you back because, yes, you are in a pile of all these things, right? So I think being proactive and is absolutely, I mean, sending an email or a text, I mean, nobody's going to see that. Nobody's going to know it. But it's too easy. But I mean, sometimes there is a lot to be said about sometimes showing up with something that does make you stand out, right? Or calling and saying something that makes you stand out. But saying that you said for me to call you. Now, everybody's under consideration. So that is for real. That was okay. But I thought it took it too far on the I mean, I think you just got to be honest and be like, I think I'm the best person for this job. So I'm circling back with you based on my application that I've submitted to you.
Yeah.
Sure. And I think, if you ask who the hiring manager is and you get a name at one point, calling back and asking for that person.
That's a good
totally
That's okay.
fine.
Totally fine.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to stand out.
Yeah, you did your research.
Your research.
And you reached out. So you've got a little more initiative than
That's a good plan.
And then when you get that person on the phone, what are the 2 or 5 sentences that you're going to say that is going to wow this person and have them invite you in? So having your elevator speech ready to go is probably important.
Yeah.
And be humble.
Yeah. And
Be
not
humble.
all about you. That's what I was going to say. Same thing as humble. Not all about you.
Right.
And tying in what they're looking for into your, making it that you're watching out for them as much as you're watching out for you already.
Yeah. Wanted to introduce myself per your request.
Yeah, that part was that was the line. It was like, per your request. That was the piece. It's like, no.
All right. Well, that wraps it up. Thank you so much for
thanks.
coming in.
Yes, thank you.
Meade Van Pelt from the Harrelson Center. We love this place. Go check them out online. Is it harrelsoncenter.org? Go check it out. She also does a really fun golf tournament. When is that?
Yes, and it's already full. That's how fun it is. What? Lisa played once before. It's September 19th. So, but you can come to the campus at any time. Don't forget the tours. First Tuesday, third Thursday at noon. Drop in. And you'll always meet somebody fun on the tour, too. And then we do have a Thankful Hearts lunch and breakfast. Now we've had a breakfast. We're doing breakfast and lunch. We had to divide out over at COVID, and now they want to keep it going. Same
Bring your
day.
Venmo and attend.
November
Harrelson.org. I want to give a shout out to a couple of other nonprofits that are near and dear to our heart. I mean, for the Chamber of Commerce, which is a nonprofit organization, definitely helped us kind of start up 5 years ago at Leath HR Group. United Way is a big favorite of ours. The Cape Fear Museum, which is actually Smithsonian affiliated. You got to love that. Take your kids. Airlie Gardens. The North Carolina Flotilla. We always have a boat in the North Carolina Flotilla. Look for us. We were the baby shark boat. Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Have a great day. No more HR nightmares. Follow us on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. Hit subscribe and tell your friends. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.